the invisible system that controls most of your life. Most of what you do every day is not a decision. You wake up and reach for your phone. You brush your teeth the same way. You sit, walk, think, react, and even worry in familiar patterns. You may believe you are choosing these actions consciously, but neuroscience tells a different story. Nearly half of human behavior is habitual. Habits are not personality traits. They are not signs of discipline or laziness. They are brain shortcuts. To understand habits, we must understand why the brain creates them in the first place. The brain's core goal: efficiency. The human brain is powerful, but it is also expensive. It consumes a massive amount of energy. Because of this, the brain is constantly looking for ways to reduce effort. Habits are one of the brain's greatest energy-saving tools. When the brain turns a behavior into a habit, it no longer needs to think about it. The action becomes automatic. This frees mental resources for new challenges. From the brain's perspective, habits are not good or bad. They are efficient. Why habits exist at all? Imagine if you had to consciously decide how to walk every time you moved. Life would be exhausting. Instead, the brain automates repeated behaviors. Once something is learned well enough, the brain says, "I've seen this before. I don't need to analyze it again." That is the moment a habit begins forming. Habits are the brain's way of saying, "This pattern works, let's keep it." The brain learns through repetition. The brain learns through experience, not intention. Every time you repeat a behavior, the brain strengthens the neural pathway responsible for that behavior. Neurons that fire together, wire together. At first, an action requires conscious effort. The brain must pay attention, evaluate outcomes, and correct mistakes. But repetition changes this. With enough repetition, the brain shifts control from conscious regions to automatic regions. This is the beginning of habit formation. The habit system lives deep in the brain. Habits are not controlled by the part of the brain responsible for logic or self-control. They are controlled by deeper, older brain structures. Their job is simple: recognize patterns, predict outcomes, automate responses. And once a behavior enters this system, it becomes resistant to change. This is why habits feel so powerful. Why willpower fails against habits. Many people try to change habits using willpower alone. They promise themselves they will stop or start a behavior. But willpower comes from the conscious brain, which is slow and energy dependent. Habits come from automatic brain circuits, which are fast and efficient. When these two systems conflict, habits usually win. This is not because you are weak, it is because the brain prioritizes efficiency over intention. Habits begin as solutions. Every habit starts as a solution to a problem. Biting nails may begin as a response to anxiety. Scrolling may begin as a way to relax. Overeating may begin as comfort. The brain notices that the behavior reduces discomfort or relief. It remembers this. The brain does not judge whether the solution is healthy long-term. It only asks, did this help right now? If the answer is yes, the behavior is stored. The brain loves predictability. The brain feels safest when outcomes are predictable. Habits create predictability. Even unhealthy habits feel familiar, and familiarity feels safe to the brain. This is why people often return to habits they consciously dislike. The habit is known, the alternative is uncertain. From the brain's perspective, certainty beats improvement. How habits become automatic. At first, habits require attention. You think about the behavior, you evaluate it. But over time, the brain begins to skip steps. Eventually, the cue alone triggers the behavior. No decision is required. This is why habits feel like they happen without thinking.
because they do. The role of cues in habit formation. Habits are triggered by cues. A cue can be a time of day, an emotion, a location, a sensation, a thought. The brain links the cue to the behavior through repetition. Once the link is strong, the cue alone is enough. This is why habits can feel sudden and uncontrollable. The brain sees the cue and runs the program. Why habits feel comfortable. Habits reduce uncertainty. The brain prefers familiar patterns because they require less energy and less risk. Even unhealthy habits feel familiar, and familiarity feels safe to the brain. This is why people often return to habits they consciously dislike. The habit is known, the alternative is uncertain. From the brain's perspective, certainty beats improvement. Habits and identity. Over time, habits shape identity. The brain begins to associate repeated behaviors with who you are. This makes habits even harder to change. Breaking a habit can feel like breaking part of yourself. This is why change often triggers discomfort, anxiety, or resistance. The brain is protecting its sense of continuity. Why habits strengthen under stress. Stress makes habits stronger. When stressed, the brain reduces complex thinking and relies more on automatic behavior. This is why people fall back into old habits during difficult times. Stress tells the brain, use what's familiar, don't experiment. Habits are the brain's emergency shortcuts. Habits are neutral until context changes. A habit that once helped can later harm. The brain does not update habits automatically. If the context changes but the habit remains, problems arise. This is why habits formed in childhood can persist into adulthood, even when they no longer serve you. The brain keeps running old programs until something interrupts them. A critical insight. Habits are not moral failures. They are learned neural patterns. They exist because the brain learned them for a reason. This understanding changes everything. You cannot shame a habit away. You must understand it. What this means going forward. In this series, we are not talking about motivation or discipline. We are talking about brain wiring. Habits are not broken through force. They are reshaped through understanding and repetition.
Habit loops, dopamine, and why repetition becomes automatic. In Part 1, we explored why habits exist and how the brain creates them to save energy and increase efficiency. We saw that habits are not flaws in character, but learned neural shortcuts designed to help the brain function with less effort. Now, in Part 2, we go deeper into the mechanics. To understand why habits become so powerful and why they persist even when we want to change them, we must look at the habit loop and the role of dopamine. This is where habits move from simple repetition to deeply ingrained automatic behavior. The habit loop, the brain's automation formula. Every habit follows a loop. This loop is not a theory or a metaphor, it is a real neurological process. First comes a cue, then a behavior, then a reward. The brain does not care about the behavior itself, it cares about the outcome. If the outcome reduces discomfort or increases pleasure, the loop is reinforced. Over time, the brain begins to run this loop automatically. The cue becomes a trigger. The behavior becomes reflexive. The reward becomes expected. Once the loop is established, the brain does not wait for conscious approval. It acts. Why the brain loves the habit loop. The habit loop simplifies life. Instead of analyzing every situation from scratch, the brain uses past experience to predict what will work. This prediction saves time, energy, and mental effort. When a loop works once, the brain marks it as useful. When it works repeatedly, the brain prioritizes it. Eventually, the loop becomes the default response. This is why habits feel inevitable. The brain is not asking, "Should I do this?" It is saying, "This is what we do." Dopamine, the reinforcement signal. Dopamine plays a crucial role in habit formation, but not in the way most people think. Dopamine is not released when the reward happens. Dopamine is released when the brain predicts a reward. As soon as the brain recognizes the cue, dopamine begins to rise. This creates a sense of anticipation and urgency. This is why habits often feel compelling before the behavior even starts. The brain is already preparing for the reward. Why cues become so powerful? Over time, dopamine becomes linked to the cue itself. The cue becomes exciting. A notification sound, a certain time of day, a feeling of stress, a place or environment. The brain learns that this cue predicts relief or pleasure. Once this learning happens, resisting the habit becomes extremely difficult, not because you lack discipline, but because dopamine is already active. The brain is already in motion. Why rewards don't have to be big? The reward that reinforces a habit does not need to be large. It only needs to be consistent. Relief from anxiety, a moment of distraction, a sense of familiarity, a small comfort. The brain is highly sensitive to emotional relief. If a behavior consistently reduces discomfort, the brain labels it as valuable. This is why many habits are rooted in emotional regulation, not pleasure. Why bad habits persist without enjoyment? One of the most confusing aspects of habits is that people often continue them even when they no longer feel good. This happens because the habit is no longer driven by pleasure. It is driven by prediction. The brain expects relief, even if the relief is weak or absent. The loop continues because the brain has not yet learned a better alternative. The habit is familiar. The alternative is unknown. The brain chooses familiarity. The shift from goal-directed to habit-based control. Early in learning, behaviors are goal-directed. You act, evaluate the outcome, and decide whether to repeat the behavior. Over time, control shifts. The brain moves behavior from conscious decision-making systems to automatic systems. This shift happens quietly. One day you realize you were doing something without thinking. This is the moment the habit has taken over. Why habits are hard to break. Once a habit is encoded, it is not erased. The brain does not delete old pathways. It layers new ones on top. This is why old habits can return under stress. The original pathway still exists. It is simply overshadowed when a stronger alternative is available. Breaking a habit is not about deleting it. It is about weakening it through disuse and building a new loop. Stress strengthens habit circuits. Stress has a powerful effect on habits. When stressed, the brain reduces activity in areas responsible for conscious control and flexibility. Automatic systems take over. This is why people revert to habits under pressure, even habits they thought they had overcome. Stress tells the brain, do what's familiar, don't experiment. Habits are the brain's emergency plan. Why awareness alone is not enough. Many people believe that understanding a habit should be enough to change it, but habits are not stored in the thinking brain. They are stored in automatic systems. Awareness helps, but it does not stop the loop. The loop must be interrupted at the level of behavior and reward. This requires strategy, not just insight. Dopamine and craving. Craving is not desire. Craving is dopamine in motion. When dopamine rises in anticipation of reward, the brain experiences a pull towards the behavior. This pull feels physical. The body leans forward. Attention narrows. Resistance feels uncomfortable. This is not weakness, it is chemistry. Why habits feel like I can't stop? The phrase "I can't stop" reflects the reality of habit circuitry. Once dopamine is active and the loop is initiated, stopping feels unnatural.
The brain wants closure. It wants to complete the loop. Interrupting the loop creates tension. This tension is often misinterpreted as lack of willpower. In reality, it is an unfinished neural prediction. The brain is not addicted to the habit. The brain is addicted to predictability. Habits provide predictability. Even harmful habits feel safe because the brain knows what will happen. Breaking a habit introduces uncertainty. The brain resists uncertainty more than harm. Why repetition is so powerful. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathway. The pathway becomes smoother, faster, and more efficient. This is why habits feel effortless over time. Effort disappears. Automaticity takes its place. Why replacement matters more than removal. You can't remove a habit without replacing it. The cue will still exist. The brain will still seek a response. If no alternative is available, the old habit returns. The brain prefers a bad solution over no solution. A crucial insight. Habits do not form because you lack control. They form because your brain learned something that worked. Understanding this removes shame and opens the door to change. What this means for change. To change a habit, you must recognize the cue, interrupt the behavior, and offer a new reward. This is not discipline, this is neuroscience.
Rewiring behavior, breaking old patterns, and teaching the brain something new. In Part 1, we explored why habits exist and how the brain forms them to conserve energy and create efficiency. In Part 2, we examined the habit loop, dopamine's role, and why habits persist even when they no longer feel rewarding. Now, in Part 3, we focus on the most important question of all. How does the brain actually change a habit? Not in theory, not through motivation slogans, but at the level of neural wiring. Because habits are not broken by force, they are replaced by learning. The brain never deletes a habit. One of the most important truths about habits is this: the brain does not erase old habits. Once a habit is learned, the neural pathway remains. This is why people can return to old habits even after years of change, especially during stress, exhaustion, or emotional overload. The habit was not gone, it was dormant. This does not mean change failed. It means the brain stores learning permanently. The goal of habit change is not deletion. It is outcompeting old pathways with stronger new ones. Why breaking a habit feels uncomfortable. When you interrupt a habit, the brain experiences prediction error. The cue appears, the brain expects a behavior. The behavior does not happen. This creates tension. The brain dislikes incomplete loops. It wants resolution. That discomfort is not failure. It is the brain noticing something new. Discomfort is a sign of rewiring. The brain needs a replacement, not a void. If a habit is removed without replacement, the brain feels unsafe. The cue still exists, the need still exists, the loop is incomplete. In this situation, the brain almost always returns to the old habit, not because it is bad, because it is familiar. Successful habit change always includes a replacement behavior that meets the same underlying need. This is how the brain accepts change. Habits solve problems the brain cares about. Every habit meets a need. Some habits reduce stress. Some create comfort. Some provide distraction. Some restore control. If the replacement habit does not meet the same need, the brain rejects it. This is why just stop never works. The brain asks,
What do I get instead? The role of environment in habit change. Habits do not live in isolation. They live in environments. The brain uses context to predict behavior. Location, time, people, lighting, and emotional states all act as cues. Changing the environment reduces the number of cues the brain must resist. This is why habit change feels easier in new places. Not because you are stronger, because the brain has fewer triggers. Why motivation is the wrong tool. Motivation is unstable. Habits are stable. Trying to change habits through motivation is like trying to override autopilot with emotion. Motivation fluctuates. Habits persist. Successful habit change relies on structure, not inspiration. Structure tells the brain what to do when motivation is absent. The power of small changes. The brain resists large changes. Large changes feel unpredictable and risky. Small changes feel manageable. When a new behavior is small, the brain does not perceive it as a threat. This allows repetition. Repetition is what rewires habits. Consistency matters more than intensity. Why identity matters so much. Over time, habits become associated with identity. The brain does not just say, "This is what I do." It says, "This is who I am." Changing a habit can feel like losing part of yourself. This is why shame and self-criticism slow habit change. The brain interprets identity threat as danger. Gentle identity shifts work better. Not, "I must stop being this way," but "I am learning a new way." The role of self-compassion in rewiring habits. Self-criticism activates threat circuits. Threat circuits strengthen old habits. Self-compassion activates safety circuits. Safety allows learning. This is not emotional language. This is neuroscience. The brain learns best when it feels safe enough to experiment. Why relapse is part of learning. Relapse does not mean failure. It means the old pathway was activated. Each relapse provides information. The brain learns what conditions reactivate the habit. This knowledge strengthens future change. People who succeed at habit change are not the ones who never relapse. They are the ones who resume learning quickly. Time and the habit brain. Habits do not change overnight. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition over time. Early stages feel effortful because the new pathway is weak. This is normal. Automaticity arrives gradually. Patience is not optional. It is biological. Why stress brings back old habits. Stress reduces access to conscious control. The brain falls back on automatic behavior. This is why stress management is habit management. If stress remains high, habit change becomes extremely difficult. The brain prioritizes survival over improvement. Reducing stress creates space for change. The brain learns through reward. The brain repeats what feels rewarding. Reward does not mean pleasure. It means completion, relief, or progress. Even small rewards strengthen new pathways. This is why celebrating small wins matters neurologically. Acknowledgement strengthens learning. Habits are learned through doing, not thinking. Understanding habits helps, but change happens through action. Each repetition physically reshapes neural connections. The brain learns by experience. Insight without repetition changes nothing. Repetition without understanding is slow. Both together create change. Why habit change feels like becoming someone new. As habits change, identity shifts. The brain begins to associate new behaviors with the self. This creates a sense of unfamiliarity. Growth often feels awkward. This discomfort is not a sign of inauthenticity. It is a sign of transition. The long-term view of habit change. The brain is plastic throughout life. It never stops learning. Habits formed in childhood can change in adulthood. Habits formed in adulthood can change later still. The brain never ages out of learning. A critical truth. You are not your habits. You are the brain that learned them, and brains can learn again. Final understanding. Habits are not enemies to defeat. They are messages from the brain. They tell you what once worked. When you listen instead of judge, change becomes possible. Final closing message. Your habits are not signs of weakness. They are signs of learning. Change does not come from force. It comes from understanding, repetition, and patience. Teach the brain something new, and it will follow.